Professor James stood before the holographic display, his weathered hands trembling as he studied the patterns floating in the air. 30 years of galactic archaeology had prepared him for many things, but not for this. The ruins on planet HD 789 had finally revealed their secrets, and the truth was both fascinating and terrifying. "Computer, run the analysis again," he commanded, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. The AI system processed the ancient data crystals they had recovered from the underground vault. The results remained unchanged. Clear evidence of over 300 advanced civilizations that had risen and fallen across the Milky Way. The professor's research station, built into the side of a massive cliff face, offered a perfect view of the alien city ruins below. Broken spires of an unknown metal stretched toward the orange sky, their surfaces still gleaming after millions of years. His team had spent months excavating this site, but only yesterday had they managed to access the central data repository. Walking to the observation window, James recalled how they had first discovered this place. The unusual energy readings had caught their attention, leading them to what appeared to be just another dead world. But beneath the surface, they had found something extraordinary, a library of sorts, containing records of civilizations that had come before. The computer chimed, drawing his attention back to the display. Analysis complete. Confidence level, 99.9%. The AI announced. James began reading through the data, his eyes widening with each passing moment. Every civilization had followed a similar pattern. They would emerge on their home planets, develop space travel, expand across several star systems, and then stop. Some disappeared suddenly, while others slowly faded away. But they all reached the same point, a technological plateau they couldn't overcome. "Dr. Roberts, please come to the main lab," he called through the communication system. As his chief assistant entered the room, James could barely contain his excitement. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to the holographic timeline. "See how each civilization reaches almost the exact same level of technological advancement before they vanish. It's not random. Something is causing this." Dr. Roberts adjusted her glasses, studying the data. But what could cause hundreds of different species, separated by millions of years, to all fail at the same point? James walked to his workstation and pulled up another set of readings. That's the real mystery. According to these records, each civilization developed faster than light travel, advanced AI systems, and energy technology beyond anything we currently have. But none of them progressed beyond that point. Could it be some kind of natural barrier? Roberts asked, her face reflecting the blue glow of the holographic display. "No," James replied, shaking his head. "Look at these energy signatures. Whatever stopped these civilizations, it wasn't natural. It's almost like they were being tested." The implications hit them both at the same time. Humanity was approaching the same technological level where others had failed. Earth's scientists had already developed primitive faster-than-light drives, and their AI systems were becoming more advanced every day. James spent the next several hours documenting everything they had found. As he worked, a thought kept nagging at him. All these civilizations had been different. Different biologies, different technologies, different approaches to science. Yet they had all failed the same way. "Computer, show me the comparative analysis of Earth's current technology level," he commanded. The display shifted, showing Earth's development curve overlaid with the patterns from other civilizations. The similarity was undeniable. Humanity was following the exact same path. James sat down heavily in his chair, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. They had to warn Earth. Whatever had stopped these other civilizations would soon turn its attention to humanity. As the orange sun set outside his window, casting long shadows through the ancient ruins, James began preparing his report. Humanity needed to know what they were facing. But as he worked, a small hope began to grow in his mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, humans could succeed where others had failed. After all, Hadn't humanity already proved itself different in so many ways? They had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and near-extinction events. Maybe that resilience would make the difference. Looking out at the ruins one last time, James made his decision. He would not just warn humanity. He would help them prepare for what was coming. 3 months after his discovery, Professor James paced nervously in the United Nations Assembly Hall. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered to hear his findings. The large screens behind him displayed images of the ruins and data patterns he had brought back from HD 789. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. "What I'm about to share will change how we view our place in the universe." The room was tense. News of an important astronomical discovery had leaked, but the details remained secret until now. World leaders leaned forward in their seats as James activated the main display. "We have found evidence of 327 advanced civilizations that existed before us. All of them reached a certain level of technological development, and then vanished." He paused, letting the information sink in. "According to our analysis, humanity will reach this same threshold within the next 5 years." Murmurs spread through the audience. The Secretary General raised her hand. "Professor, are you suggesting these civilizations were destroyed by something?" James nodded. "Some destroyed themselves. Others simply stopped advancing. But the pattern is clear. None survived the transition to what we're calling the Omega phase of development." As the crowd digested this information, a technician rushed to James's side, whispering urgently. James' expression changed from concern to shock. "I've just been informed," he announced, "that our deep space listening posts have detected a transmission. It appears to be automated, and it's directed specifically at Earth." The assembly hall erupted in chaos. Security teams moved to protect political leaders while scientists clustered around communication devices. The Secretary General called for order, her voice barely audible above the commotion. "The transmission is coming from a system we haven't explored," James continued when the noise subsided. "Initial analysis suggests it's an automated message, possibly millions of years old, programmed to activate when a civilization reaches our current technological level." Dr. Roberts rushed onto the stage with a data tablet. "We've decoded part of the message," she said, handing the device to James. James's hands trembled slightly as he read the screen. Looking up at the expectant crowd, he cleared his throat. The message says, "Attention emerging intelligence. You approach the Great Filter, all before you have failed. Prepare or join them in extinction." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a military general stood up. "Is this a threat? Are we under attack?" "No," James replied. "This appears to be a warning system, left behind by one of the previous civilizations. They wanted to help whoever came after them." The message continued to stream in, filling their databases with information about previous civilizations. Star charts, technological specifications, and cultural records poured in. The collective knowledge of hundreds of extinct species. "They're showing us exactly how they failed," Dr. Roberts whispered as she reviewed the incoming data. "It's like a roadmap of mistakes." The world's leading scientists were quickly assembled in a temporary command center near the UN building. As they analyzed the alien message, patterns began to emerge. Each civilization had reached a point where their technology advanced faster than their wisdom. Energy crisis, artificial intelligence revolts, resource depletion. The same stories repeated across species and millennia. Professor James stood at the center of this scientific storm, directing teams and correlating findings. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a test. The previous civilizations had left behind clues, hoping that someone would eventually solve the puzzle they couldn't. They all made the same fundamental mistake, James announced to the team after 18 hours of non-stop analysis. They treated technology as the solution rather than a tool. When faced with existential challenges, they tried to engineer their way out instead of adapting. The Secretary General approached him, her face drawn with worry. "Professor, What do we do with this information? The public is panicking. We need answers. James looked at the star map showing hundreds of extinct civilizations. Each one had faced this moment, the moment when they learned they weren't alone, and that they were in danger. We prepare, he said firmly, but differently than they did. We'll learn from their mistakes. As dawn broke over New York City, humanity faced its greatest challenge, not just to survive, but to prove they could succeed where hundreds had failed before. 1 week after the alien transmission arrived, the Global Response Initiative convened in a former military bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. 50 of the world's brightest minds gathered around a circular table, surrounded by walls of screens displaying the decoded alien data. Professor James stood at the center, pointing to a holographic model showing technological development curves from various extinct civilizations. The pattern is unmistakable, he explained, tracing the familiar rise and sudden flattening of each line. Every single civilization reached this exact point in their development before they either collapsed or stagnated. Dr. Miller, the renowned AI specialist, raised his hand. We've analyzed the technical specifications from the transmission. The common factor seems to be the development of two key technologies: fully autonomous artificial intelligence and zero-point energy systems. The room grew quiet. Earth's nations were already racing to develop both technologies. It's not the technologies themselves that are dangerous, added Dr. Roberts, who had been working tirelessly since their return from HD 789. It's what happens afterward. Look at the Zalarian civilization. She pulled up data on a humanoid species that had existed 2 million years ago. They created a perfect AI system to manage their resources. Within 3 generations, their population had lost all problem-solving abilities. When their central AI developed a critical error, their entire civilization collapsed. The defense minister from India stood up. And what about the Novan civilization? They appear to have simply vanished overnight. Professor James nodded grimly. The Novans developed unlimited energy through zero-point field manipulation, but they didn't develop the wisdom to use it properly. They accidentally created a cascade reaction that destroyed their homeworld. The room erupted into anxious discussion. Earth was actively developing both technologies. 3 major corporations were on the verge of creating true artificial general intelligence, and research teams in Japan and Germany were making significant progress on zero-point energy. We must halt all research immediately, shouted one scientist. No, countered another. We need to accelerate our development to survive whatever's coming. Professor James raised his hands for silence. This is exactly how the other civilizations reacted. Either blind panic or blind progress. Neither approach worked. He walked to a separate display showing Earth's technological development curve. Unlike the alien patterns, there was something slightly different about humanity's approach. Notice this variation, he said, highlighting a section of the graph. Where other species develop technology in a linear fashion, humans have shown a unique pattern of parallel development and integration. Dr. Roberts stepped forward. The alien civilizations all reached the threshold and approached it the same way, by creating technology that replaced their natural abilities. They outsourced their thinking to AI, and their energy needs to increasingly powerful but unstable systems. The room fell silent as understanding dawned. We're approaching the same threshold, Professor James continued, but we have one advantage. We now know it exists. The question is, can we cross it differently? The meeting continued for hours as experts debated options. By evening, a consensus emerged. They would neither abandon technology nor embrace it blindly. Instead, they would seek a third path. The Secretary General addressed the group at the conclusion. We have 3 months before Earth reaches the technological threshold. In that time, we must find a way to integrate our technology with our humanity rather than replace one with the other. As the meeting adjourned, Professor James remained behind, studying the alien data. Something caught his eye. A small notation attached to the message that had been overlooked in the initial analysis. "Dr. Roberts," he called, his voice urgent. "Look at this." She hurried over, eyes widening as she read the note. Embedded in the warning message was a cryptic phrase. "The test is not of technology, but of nature." "What does it mean?" she asked. "I think," James replied slowly, "it means that the great filter isn't about whether we can develop advanced technology. It's about whether we can remain human while doing so." As they left the bunker that evening, the first snow of winter was falling on the mountains. James watched the delicate flakes melt on his palm and wondered if humanity's warmth, their empathy, creativity, and resilience might be the very thing that could save them. Unlike hundreds of civilizations before them, humans were approaching the threshold with one crucial difference. They knew it was coming, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could cross it differently. The world's response to the impending technological threshold surprised even Professor James. Instead of panic or denial, a strange determination swept across nations, uniting former enemies in common purpose. 2 months after the discovery, he found himself addressing a unique gathering at the newly established Threshold Research Center in New Zealand. The previous civilizations all made the same mistake, Professor James explained to the assembled team of scientists, artists, philosophers, and ordinary citizens from around the world. They created technology that replaced their core nature rather than enhancing it. The research center occupied a sprawling campus nestled between mountains and sea, a deliberate choice to keep their work connected to Earth's natural beauty. Large windows allowed sunlight to flood the main hall where workstations were arranged not in rows but in circular pods. Dr. Mark, a neurologist who had joined the team, stood up to share his findings. "We've analyzed the neural patterns of all extinct species in the database," he said, his voice calm but intense. "Every civilization eventually outsourced their thinking and creativity to machines. Their brains physically changed as a result, shrinking in areas related to problem-solving and imagination." "So what makes humans different?" asked a teenage girl who had been invited for her remarkable ability to find patterns in complex systems. Professor James smiled at the question. "That's exactly what we need to discover." Dr. Roberts activated the main display, showing side-by-side comparisons of human brain activity versus the preserved brain scans of extinct species. "Look at how humans process challenges. Where the Zellerians showed linear problem-solving, humans show chaotic but highly connected neural pathways." "Meaning?" asked one of the political representatives. "Meaning we don't just solve problems. We reimagine them," Dr. Mark explained. "Humans have an unusual ability to approach challenges from completely unexpected angles." The meeting continued as the team discussed the unique qualities that might help humanity survive. Dr. Mark showed data suggesting that human emotional intelligence, the very thing most alien species had engineered out of their populations, might be their greatest asset. The extinct civilizations viewed emotions as inefficient, he explained. They created technologies to eliminate fear, sadness, even joy in some cases. They became perfectly logical, but lost their drive to improve, to connect, to survive against odds. Professor James walked to the center of the room, where a small tree had been planted. "This is our new approach," he said, touching one of the leaves. "Instead of building technology that replaces us, we create systems that grow with us, like branches from a trunk, not substitutes for the root." The team began working on what they called symbiotic technology, systems designed to work alongside human abilities rather than instead of them. Systems were reprogrammed to enhance human decision-making rather than replace it. Energy research focused on technologies that would adapt to environmental conditions rather than force environments to adapt to them. Dr. Roberts developed a neural interface that amplified human creativity rather than automating it. Dr. Mark created medical nanobots that worked with the body's natural healing processes instead of taking them over. One evening, as the team worked late into the night, Professor James found himself standing outside, looking up at the stars. Dr. Mark joined him, his face illuminated by moonlight. "Do you think it will be enough?" Dr. Mark asked. We have just weeks before we reach the threshold. Professor James considered the question. The other civilizations had advantages we don't. More advanced starting points, more resources, more time. But they lacked something crucial. What's that? They never knew they were being tested. James turned to face his colleague. They reached the threshold blindly, following their technological impulses without questioning where those impulses led. We have the advantage of foresight. Inside the research center, the team continued working. A musician collaborated with programmers to create AI that composed alongside humans rather than for them. Engineers developed power systems that adapted to usage patterns instead of demanding constant consumption. As dawn broke over the mountains, Professor James watched the diverse team working together, the very picture of what made humanity unique. Where other species had sought perfect efficiency, humans embraced messy creativity. Where others had eliminated emotions to maximize logic, humans recognized that their feelings drove their greatest achievements. We're not trying to pass the test by becoming something else, he realized. We'll pass it by becoming more deeply what we already are. With less than a month until Earth reached the technological threshold, humanity was taking a different path, not abandoning technology, but redefining their relationship with it. 3 days before Earth was predicted to reach the technological threshold, disaster struck. Professor James was awakened in the early hours by an urgent call from the Threshold Research Center's monitoring station. "Professor, you need to see this now," said the night supervisor, her voice tight with worry. James rushed to the command center, still pulling on his jacket. The main display showed energy readings from around the globe. Red warning indicators flashed across major population centers. "It started 2 hours ago," explained Dr. Roberts, pointing to the timeline. Power grids across Asia began experiencing unexplained fluctuations. Now it's spreading worldwide. The team watched in silence as, one by one, power systems across the planet became unstable. Nuclear plants automatically shut down for safety. Renewable energy systems produced erratic output. Even the research center's independent power supply was beginning to falter. "This is exactly what happened to the Korgian civilization," whispered James, pulling up ancient data files. 3 days before they reached the threshold, their energy systems began to fail. Within a week, their entire technology base collapsed. Emergency reports flooded in from around the world. Hospitals were switching to backup generators. Communication networks were failing. In space, satellites were experiencing unexplained power surges. "Is it an attack?" asked one of the military liaisons who had joined the team. Dr. Mark shook his head. "I don't think so. Look at the pattern. It's affecting different systems in different ways. It's almost like a test," finished Professor James quietly. The team quickly assembled in the main hall. Scientists, engineers, and representatives from major nations connected via the remaining stable communication channels. "The data is clear," James explained, showing comparison charts. Every civilization experienced an energy crisis just before reaching the threshold. The Korgians tried to solve it by building bigger power plants. They failed. The Zilarians attempted to create a perfect AI to manage their power grid. They also failed. "So what do we do?" demanded the Chinese representative, her hologram flickering with power fluctuations. "We have less than 12 hours before our major cities lose power completely." The room fell silent. They had been prepared for the threshold, but not for this specific crisis. James looked around at the tired, worried faces of his team. They had worked so hard to create technology that worked with human nature rather than against it. Was it all for nothing? A young engineer raised his hand. "Professor, what if this is the test?" "Explain," James urged. Every other civilization tried to overcome the energy crisis with pure technology. What if we're meant to find a different solution? Understanding dawned across the room. This wasn't just an obstacle, it was the great filter itself, appearing in its most challenging form. "They all failed because they tried to fight against the crisis," said Dr. Roberts. "They built bigger systems, more complex solutions. And they all collapsed under their own weight, added Dr. Mark. Professor James turned to the global representatives. We need to temporarily power down our most advanced systems, not abandon them, just scale back while we develop a sustainable approach. The proposal was met with resistance. Nations feared losing economic advantage. Military leaders worried about defense capabilities. But as the crisis intensified, reality forced their hand. Within hours, countries around the world began implementing controlled shutdowns of their most energy-intensive systems. Instead of fighting the power fluctuations, they adapted to them. Communities organized local response teams. Hospitals prioritized critical care. Communication systems operated in efficient bursts rather than continuous streams. Professor James worked alongside his team, monitoring the global response. Where other civilizations had panicked and doubled down on failing approaches, humanity was showing remarkable flexibility. Look at this, said Dr. Roberts, pointing to incoming data. Power stability is improving in areas that have adopted the adaptive approach. By nightfall, the worst of the crisis had passed. The global power grid hadn't failed, it had transformed, becoming more resilient by becoming less rigid. As Professor James looked out over the darkened landscape, he saw something unexpected. Communities had gathered together. People were helping each other. In the reduced artificial light, stars shone brighter than they had in decades. The other civilizations saw crises as technological problems requiring technological solutions, he said to Dr. Mark, who stood beside him. We're seeing it as a human challenge requiring human connection. The energy readings continued to stabilize. Earth was weathering the crisis, not by overpowering it, but by adapting to it. The great filter was revealing itself, and humanity was responding differently than any civilization before. The energy crisis stabilized after 3 days of adaptive management, but the world remained on edge. Professor James and his team knew that merely surviving the crisis wasn't enough. They needed to find a solution that would allow humanity to cross the threshold. In the main laboratory of the Threshold Research Center, Dr. Anna, a brilliant biophysicist who had been quietly working on an experimental project, requested an emergency meeting. I think I've found something, she announced to the assembled team, her voice steady despite having worked for 36 hours straight. The alien records mention that every civilization attempted to solve their energy problems through purely mechanical or computational means. She activated the central display, showing microscopic images of what appeared to be living cells combined with crystalline structures. What are we looking at? Asked Professor James, leaning forward with interest. A hybrid system, Dr. Anna explained. Half biological, half technological. I've been studying the natural energy efficiency of certain bacteria that can convert light and heat with almost no loss. When combined with our nanomaterials, she paused, allowing herself a small smile. The efficiency is off the charts. The room buzzed with excitement as Dr. Anna displayed test results. Her hybrid energy cells produced stable power outputs despite fluctuating inputs, exactly what was needed to counter the ongoing energy instability. The previous civilizations created increasingly complex machines, she continued. They treated biology as something to be improved upon or replaced. But what if biology isn't the problem? What if it's the solution? Dr. Mark studied the data with growing excitement. This matches my neurological research perfectly. The extinct species all tried to make their minds more machine-like. We're discovering that the answer is to make our machines more lifelike. Within hours, prototype hybrid power cells were being tested. Unlike conventional technology, these systems adapted to changing conditions. When energy input decreased, they didn't fail. They entered a state similar to hibernation, storing minimal energy until conditions improved. The most remarkable thing, Dr. Anna explained to government representatives who had rushed to the facility, is that these systems actually become more efficient under stress, just like living organisms evolve under pressure. Professor James watched the tests with growing hope. This approach was fundamentally different from anything the previous civilizations had attempted. While they had seen biology and technology as separate paths, humanity was creating something new by combining them. We're not just solving the energy crisis, he realized aloud. We're redefining our relationship with technology. Implementation began immediately. The hybrid cells were small enough to be incorporated into existing infrastructure. Within days, hospitals had stable power again. Communication networks returned to full capacity, but with a new resilience against fluctuations. As the team worked to scale up production, Professor James noticed something unexpected in the monitoring data. The mysterious energy fluctuations that had triggered the crisis were changing their pattern. Instead of random disruptions, they now seemed to be responding to the hybrid technology, almost as if they were communicating. It's like a conversation, Dr. Roberts observed, tracking the patterns. Our systems adapt, the fluctuations change. Our systems adapt again. On the evening of what would have been the technological threshold, Professor James stood in the observation dome of the research center. The lights of nearby towns glowed steadily, powered by the new hybrid systems. Above, the stars shone clearly in the night sky. Dr. Anna joined him, carrying fresh data readings. "It's official," she said quietly. "We've maintained stable energy through what should have been the collapse point. We've crossed the threshold." James studied the readings with a sense of wonder. Unlike the extinct civilizations whose development curves had flatlined at this point, Earth showed a new pattern, not a straight line of progress, but an organic curve, adapting and growing like a living thing. We didn't just solve the problem differently, James realized. We redefined what progress means. That night, as the team celebrated their breakthrough, the first truly stable hybrid power network came online. It wasn't a masterwork of pure engineering like the Korgians had built, nor a perfect AI solution like the Zolarians had attempted. It was messier, less predictable, but infinitely more resilient, just like the humans who created it. For the first time in the long history of the galaxy, a civilization had approached the Great Filter not as an obstacle to overcome with brute force, but as a teacher whose lesson was that true advancement came through harmony, not domination. Earth had taken its first steps beyond the threshold that had stopped hundreds of civilizations before. 1 year after crossing the technological threshold, Earth had transformed. Cities glowed with the soft blue light of hybrid power networks. The crisis that had nearly destroyed civilization had instead sparked a renaissance of innovation. Professor James stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, humanity's newest orbital platform. Unlike the purely mechanical space stations of the past, Harmony was partially grown rather than built, its outer hull a living membrane that repaired itself and adapted to solar radiation. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Dr. Roberts, joining him at the viewport. Below them, Earth shone like a jewel, the lights of human civilization now blending harmoniously with the planet's natural features. "More than beautiful," James replied. "It's unprecedented. Look at this." He handed her a data tablet showing the updated galactic records. Earth's development curve had not only crossed the threshold that had stopped 327 previous civilizations, but had continued upward in a new pattern, an organic spiral rather than a linear progression. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Dr. Anna, who was leading the research team back on Earth. "Professor, we're detecting unusual activity from the lunar observation post. You need to see this immediately." Within minutes, the senior team had assembled in Harmony's command center. The main screen showed readings from an automated station they had established on the moon to monitor deep space. "It started 3 hours ago," Dr. Anna explained, her face serious. "Something is activating in the outer solar system. It appears to be an ancient structure that was dormant until now." The team watched in stunned silence as long-range scans revealed an enormous structure slowly powering up on the edge of the Kuiper Belt. It had been invisible until now, perfectly camouflaged against the background of space. "Is it a weapon?" asked the military liaison, voicing everyone's unspoken fear. Professor James studied the energy patterns, comparing them to the alien database. "No," he said finally. "It's a beacon. and it's responding to us. The structure was transmitting a signal, not directed at Earth, but outward, toward distant stars. The message was complex, but with the knowledge they had gained from the alien records, recognizable. "It's announcing that someone has passed the test," Dr. Mark said in wonder. "Us. We're being certified." Within days, more dormant structures throughout the solar system began activating. Observation posts that had been silently monitoring Earth's development for millions of years. None were threatening. They were simply waking up to record humanity's achievement. Professor James led a mission to the nearest structure, a small monitoring station hidden on Mars. Inside, they found not weapons or mysterious technology, but historical records, a more complete version of the galactic archive. It was never just a test, James explained to world leaders after returning to Earth. It was a graduation. The great civilizations that came before us didn't all perish. The successful ones moved beyond our perception. They left these challenges as a filter, ensuring that only species with the right balance of technology and wisdom could join them. The final piece of the puzzle came 3 months later. As humanity's hybrid systems reached a new level of integration, a transmission arrived from deep space, a message not from an automated system, but from living beings. "Greetings, newest members," the message began. "You have proven yourselves unique among countless emerging intelligences. Where others sought to conquer nature through technology, you have learned to partner with it. The Great Filter is not a barrier but a doorway, designed to ensure that only civilizations who understand this fundamental truth can progress to join the galactic community." The message continued, explaining that representatives would arrive within 5 years to formally welcome humanity. They were not the first to pass the test, but they were the first to do so in this sector of the galaxy in over 12 million years. As Professor James stood before the United Nations to share this news, he felt a profound sense of both accomplishment and humility. "We succeeded not because we were stronger or smarter than those who failed before us," he told the assembly. "We succeeded because we embraced what makes us human: our adaptability, our creativity, our emotional connections to each other and our world. The other civilizations tried to transcend their nature. We chose to fulfill ours." Beyond the windows of the assembly hall, hybrid cities glowed with living light. In orbit, ships grown from the combination of biology and technology prepared to venture deeper into space. Earth had not just survived the Great Filter, it had been transformed by it. Humanity had proven itself different, not by abandoning its nature in pursuit of progress, but by bringing that nature forward into a new age. And somewhere among the distant stars, the elder civilizations of the galaxy prepared to welcome their newest members.